So today, we are going to continue our series walking through the Gospel of Mark. Last week, Nick talked about the idea of we're called to emulate Christ. That we're called to be, he used the term ambassadors of Christ. And I loved that term, that idea. An ambassador is someone who, in a different location, tangibly and practically is the person, the country, whatever it is they represent. So it's reminding us that to a lot of people we encounter, whether we like it or not, we are the representation of Christ. We are Christ to some of those people. Not in the theological we are Christ, but in the when they see us, that's what they see. And so, the book itself, Mark, now transitions to a time of Jesus going out and doing the work. And so that's what we're going to look at now, especially over the next couple of weeks, is, all right, we're called to emulate Jesus. How? So that's what we're going to look at as we move forward. So I'm just going to read our passage straight through, and then we'll go back through it, touch on some things, have some fun. So I'm going to start right where we picked up, right where we left off last week, Mark 21. So they, the couple disciples and Jesus, went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, he entered the synagogue and taught. They were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, not as the scribes. Just then, there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What do you have to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent, come out of him." And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. They were amazed, and they kept on asking one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." At once, his fame began to spread throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. So, from the very beginning, where is this set? Well, we're told, set in the village of Capernaum. It is just on the north of the lake up here. Now, some background on this city. There's no nice, easy way to say it. Capernaum was the ghetto. It was not a good city. It was a very rough, blue-collar fishing village with a lot of violence, a lot of bad things. I haven't lived here long enough to know the equivalent here, but it would be like your Compton, your Inland Empires, your Tenderloin, those kind of neighborhoods. And yet, that is where Jesus set up his base of operations. Capernaum is where Jesus moved to and lived during his ministry. So there's a whole lot we could unpack there. We don't have time for it, but just keep that in your head that Jesus intentionally goes and moves to maybe the worst town in Galilee and says, "This is where I'm setting up my base." Now, even further, the name Capernaum, I know it's small up there, but you've heard of it before. It's mentioned a bunch of times throughout the Gospels. The name, the village of Capernaum, actually literally translates to the village of Nahum. Now, I see Doc's face. Look, he's real excited right now. For those of you, this is going to be another plug, who are coming on Thursday nights, we are walking through the minor prophets, of which, we recognize, one of them is Nahum. And so, all of you come on Thursday night should hopefully know what I'm about to talk about and say. We did 2 weeks ago we talked about it. So Nahum is a book, it's a short book, and I think read through basically the whole thing that Thursday. It is a book that talks about the hope and celebration of God's justice. The book itself is looking at the fall of Nineveh and the Assyrian Empire through this lens of good. God's justice is prevailing. Now, there's a whole debate going on about how should we feel about the downfall of our... It's a whole thing in that book. And it's a great debate, and we had a good debate that night. But the main baseline of the book, it is about God's promise and divine timing. God's appointment of what will happen. Whether things are going really good or really bad, it is all part of God's timing. That is kind of the main thrust of the book of Nahum. So just keep that in the back of your head today, and as we go through Mark, because we're going to come back to this village over and over again. And I'll encourage you, if you have time, just read through the book of Nahum. It's literally, like, you can probably do it in 10 minutes. It's a short book. But so just keep that in your head as we go forward. Because those themes that are presented in that book are hitting kind of the undercurrents of things that will happen in this village over the next, well, for us, couple years as we walk through this book. Now, so we have the setting of it. What is happening here? Well, Jesus starts by coming in and teaching. Whoop, I scrolled way too far. They talk about Jesus' teaching as one with authority. It's not theoretical. It's not purely academic, right? You've heard of the difference between like, oh, well, this is book smart and street smart. Well, Jesus has both, but they're kind of leaning to this idea of he's talking about this like he knows it, he's seen it, he's been a part of it, because he has. They don't know that yet because he has. And this is a very different understanding of things. And when you talk with someone, you will identify this difference really quickly in someone if they're talking about something that is lived, that they've experienced before. So I was on the phone with a friend 2 weeks ago. We were doing a FaceTime. Her father had just passed away not that long ago. And we were having this long conversation. And partway through, she stops and is like, I am so glad I get to talk to you. You understand. And not because I'm great at talk counseling or anything like that, just because my dad has died as well. So I know a little bit of the emotion she's feeling. We can make dead dad jokes together and we understand what we mean by it. Whereas other people, you can't. But so she's like, I can just talk to you because you know what it's like right now. I don't have to explain this to you. So that's kind of the attitude people are having with Jesus right now. It's like he's talking about this like he actually genuinely knows it and has lived it. And we're going to see this theme, this idea of Jesus' authority going forward today, but also beyond throughout the entire book. So, Jesus is teaching. Whoa, I keep scrolling way too far. And then in the midst of this, we have this encounter. And notice the verbiage here. Just then, there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit. I did a lot of reading into the specific verbiage, the language that is used here. Commentators are kind of on the same page that this person had been in the synagogue. They didn't just wander in. Meaning, this person had been there this whole time. In the midst of the synagogue, there was a demon-possessed person. So just keep that in your mind for 2 or 3 minutes, because that's going to be really important when we come back to it. But just remember, this person had been there the whole time. And then the demon recognizes Jesus. Again, re-hitting on this authority idea. He cries out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us?" Again, we could probably teach for 2 months on this idea of just what does it mean when you have, in this case, a demon, recognizing Jesus' authority, accepting Jesus' authority, you have the power to destroy us, but yet still choosing evil. There's a whole thing we could go down with that. That's a very deep theological hole we could dive into. But again, just keep it in your head. Because we're going, and you might not think it, but because we're going so fast there, Mark, we can only kind of hit on some of these notes. But just keep that in your head. And then Jesus just simply tells the demon to go. How does Jesus deal with this? There's no big incantation. There's no big spell. There's no rite. There's no ritual. Nothing like that. It's just basically, go on now, get. Just tells the demon, it's time for you to go. And again, this is hammering the idea of Jesus' authority. The people are shocked by this, of just, even the demons just simply do what he says. So there's our story. How do we put this into the larger kind of narrative? What is the point of this story in the narrative of Mark? Well, okay, think about it for a second. This is really the first kind of public ministry activity Jesus has done. He was baptized, forced out in the wilderness, collected some disciples, not all of them, some of them, and is now here teaching. This is the first, what we call sign act that Jesus does, first big miracle. And remember the setup. So he is in a synagogue on the Sabbath. So if this was today, he would be here in this building. He would be in a church on Sunday. So that's the setup. And what does he do? He cast out evil. He cast out a demon, and evil, as we said, was already there. So either the people didn't recognize it, or were willfully ignoring it. Do you think there's some symbolism going on here? And let's take it even further. Jesus kicks off his public ministry in Mark. Kind of a side note, every one of the Gospels has the events of Jesus' life presented in a different order. Some exclude things, some others. They're not interested in giving a full biography of Jesus. Each one of them has a theme that they are highlighting, and we'll touch on Mark's theme here. So I know the most famous Jesus' first miracle is the wedding of Cana, water into wine. Mark, it's this one, and you'll see why. So his first miracle in Mark is basically casting a demon out of a church. If we fast forward to Mark 11, the last big thing Jesus does before he's arrested is cleanse the temple. Cast evil, flip the tables, kick the money changers out of the temple of God. So Jesus in Mark begins and ends his ministry by casting evil out of the church. There's a lot to unpack there. So he's calling out and naming evil in the house of God, is what's bookending his ministry in Mark. Okay, how do we do that? We're not going to probably be casting out demons. I hope no one here is casting out demons, right? That's probably not something we're going to do. So what are we supposed to take out of this passage? Okay, well, let's go on a quick excursus. Tangent. One of my favorite shows growing up, and probably honestly still today, is Scooby Doo. I love Scooby Doo. Scooby Doo's awesome. I'm sure everyone here knows Scooby Doo, but it's kids, they're solving mysteries, and they generally have some sort of magical quote unquote element to it. It's a ghost, it's the demon of the lighthouse or whatever, right? But what is always the end of Scooby Doo? It's never actually a real ghost, a real demon, a real thing. It's generally just some dude in a mask. It's the caretaker half the time. Yeah, the joke is at the beginning of the episode, whatever character they introduce that's not part of the main cast, that's the bad guy. That's the villain. But on a deeper level, what does Scooby Doo teach us? That the real monsters are the people around us. The real monsters are the people who wear masks to hide their true intentions. Uh-oh, that's too deep for a 70s, 60s when it started? It was a while ago. Basically stoner cartoon about solving mysteries. That is really deep for that. But how true is that? That the real evil around us are people that put on false faces and masks to hide their own evil intentions. So we are more than likely not going to come face to face with a physical demon. But I bet we come face to face with a Scooby Doo monster every single day. These are people, entities, whatever you want to call it, that put on a mask, a face of love, while only seeking to further their own ends, to further their own selfish ambitions, hiding their true face of pride. How do we deal with that? Again, what did Jesus do? There was no big ritual, no special incantation, no anything. He just pointed at it, called it out, brought it to light. Now, I do not want you to hear me saying that this is meant to inspire some sort of fervent finger pointing of everyone, a witch hunt. No. Let's even pause for a second there. The idea of witch hunt What was it? It was the witch hunters were mostly powerful, rich, white men who were using the Bible to justify killing people who threatened their authority. They in themselves being the Scooby Doo Demons in that case. So that is not what we're trying to get at here. So what is it about? It's not about quibbling, arguing, pointing fingers at someone who interprets a passage differently than you do. This person believes in infant baptism. This person doesn't. Oh, we got to beef. We got to fight. That is not what it's about. That person's living in sin. That's not what it's about. So what is it about? Well, let's turn to Jesus. And if you're starting to get to know me, you might have an idea what passage I'm about to go to. They asked Jesus this, and he said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. Second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang the law and the prophets." I hope you're not getting tired of this passage because it's gonna be on the screen a lot. Because I think it is the actual core of what we're called to do. To me, this is the simplest distilled version of the gospel. I had a seminary professor who was an amazing theologian, would go insanely crazy, you would get lost in his arguments of things. Brilliant. But he always ended his class every year with, "You can sum up my entire theology, the massive litany of books I have read, with a simple idea: don't be a jerk. You're going to hit 95% of the gospel if you do that." And he's not wrong. And I feel like that's what this is getting at here. So this is where we can see evil and how it reacts, how it lives this out, through loving God and loving others. Because we can't say we love God if we're not loving others, if we're not loving our neighbors. So for us today, and arguably for most of history, this is the kind of evil, the kind of Scooby Doo monsters, demons we face. People who don't love God, but more tangibly, don't love their neighbor. For that is how we show God's love. That is how we represent, that is how we are ambassadors of God, is through love. Through loving others, through loving our neighbors. And this passage talked a lot about Jesus' authority. That same authority resides within us. We're going to see that as we go through Mark, that the authority that Jesus wields here has been given to us to represent Jesus in these instances, to these people, to the world. But that's what we're called to do, is to call out people that do not love. So this is the first way that Mark highlights how we are to emulate and be ambassadors of Christ. Call out injustice. Reflect Jesus' love to others, to our neighbors. To not let people use the church or use the gospel as weapons to imprison others, as weapons to hold people down, just like the demon-possessed man was being imprisoned, being held down by evil. We have the authority to bring the freedom and the love that Christ carried. And that is an authority that resides within us. But that is an authority that is birthed from and comes from and resides in a place of love. So let's go out, display that love, show that love, present the love of Christ to those we encounter every day. Join me as we pray.